must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone, for this little mini rant that I'm going to add on today's show. So many people sent me a link to this story coming out of Brooklyn that I just had to comment on it. The story involves a man named Arthur Mandela, age 57, who is the owner of a maraschino cherry factory in Brooklyn, New York. You know, those big red, colorful cherries, right? He was supplying major industries as well. He was supplying major players in the restaurant industry like Chick-fil-A, Red Lobster, and so on. So his company was making maraschino cherries, and there was a search that was conducted because there was some rumor that he was involved with a marijuana grow in some sort of way. So the cops tried to get a warrant for this guy's place, could not get a warrant. They didn't have any probable cause. There were some folks that had said they could every now and then smell a faint odor of marijuana, but there was not enough to convince a judge to get a warrant. So instead of getting a warrant for a criminal activity, they went to the Department of Environmental Protection in New York, you know, kind of a EPA at the New York level, right? And issued these administrative warrants for environmental inspections of the factory. Now, there was some precedent for this. There was complaints in the past that this guy was releasing syrup from the factory into the waters around the area, and local bees were turning red from the dye, the maraschino cherry juice. So there was, you know, some flimsy little reason for having this administrative warrant. They go down to this guy's factory, and he's kind of nervous while everybody's looking around the factory. And soon enough, these inspectors found this wall where there was some shelving that was up there with just magnets. It seemed really flimsy. And in this wall, it was a false wall. And they found that it moved aside. And when they moved this false wall aside, the guy had carved out like a cave and had this massive marijuana grow going on. It had like 3 bags, like 80 pounds of marijuana they found, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. While these guys were first looking at the false wall, Arthur Mandela excuses himself to go to the bathroom, locks himself in the bathroom, yells out to his sister, "Take care of my kids," and then shoots himself in the head, commits suicide. Wow. And my first thought when this story went down was, marijuana ain't child pornography, dude. It's not like they uncovered a false wall and you're like the guy who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. You got some sort of dungeon there with, you know, kids in chains being used for sexual purposes or something. It's a marijuana grow. And to think that our laws are still so punitive and our treatment of marijuana consumers and producers and sellers is so vicious that someone would feel they'd need to kill themselves over this. The police couldn't believe it either. They said, well, there has to be something else. There's got to be some other reason. Nobody kills himself over pot. Well, yes, they do. Obviously, they do. This guy realizes that his business could be seized. He realizes he could be facing mandatory minimums in prison. He's 57 years old. You put him in for a 10-year mandatory. That's a long time when you're that old. Now, he leaves behind an ex-wife and a toddler daughter, unfortunately. But the cops who can't believe that someone would kill themselves over this really need to take a look at how they're treating people, especially in New York, where it's the marijuana arrest capital of the world. Even still, despite the dramatic declines they've seen, over 30,000 arrests per year in New York City. I am not surprised this guy committed suicide. I'm just saddened to think that this guy had to go to Breaking Bad levels of, Pollos Hermanos levels here of hiding his marijuana grow inside a maraschino cherry factory, when we've got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of square foot legal grows going on in Denver, going on in Seattle, and all across those two states, and soon to be expanding to Alaska and Oregon. And we've got places in 23 states now, most of those 23 states, where people are cultivating marijuana. It's either being done for the dispensaries or people are doing it for themselves. And this guy felt like he had to commit suicide. Couldn't run both his family business of the cherry factory and the actual profitable business of growing marijuana at the same time. It's a shame that he couldn't have sold the factory and moved out west and become legal like the rest of us, but it's a bigger shame that people should have to move and leave their families and leave their family businesses in order to be legal and participate in one of the few growth industries that we have left in this country. It's a sad day for the family of Arthur Mandela and people that worked with him, and neighbors said he was a wonderful man and very helpful in times of need. But another person who's been brought down because of the prohibition of marijuana.
420 Radio.